Hey everybody, I am here today with screenwriter and director and playwright and many other things. You know him from writing things like The Eye Inside, Identity, Six Souls, and the movie we are talking today, the writer and director of Jack Frost, Michael Cooney. How are you doing today?
I am good, thank you. Very happy to be here and chat about Jack to begin my holiday season.
It's a wonderful way to get it going. It's putting up the tree for me this year. I think it's gonna really get everything going, other than the blistering wind coming from the outside right now, which you might hear on the microphone or might not, hopefully. But yeah, I wanted to talk to you. So I always am fascinated with writers, particularly writers of horror and thriller and stuff like that. There's a certain amount of uh, kind of psychosis you have to put your head into to write it. And I was thinking about especially something like Identity or Six Souls. It's a much more psychological thing than Jack Frost would be, which is a much more on the surface
Yeah.
horror movie. What is it about that, do you suppose, is excuse me, is like how do you get into the heads of those characters for making a movie like that?
Well, it's funny. It's something that you don't think about unless you're actually asked the question. That's the truth of it. It just sort of it does happen, but I do know that it takes a moment to get into these things. And one of the biggest changes that happened for me was having kids. And before I had kids, so that the script of Identity and the script of Six Souls that were written before kids, and I remember. So there's a bit of a story. On the set of Six Souls, there's a flashback sequence to the murder of two children in a tent, and we were. I had the family up. We shot in Pittsburgh, and we were on the set. And I remember I was so excited to show the kids the set. And I remember walking them through that tent with dead children and blood
Oh man.
splattered. And I had this thought of what the hell am I doing? And that my for a moment I and this there was a purpose to going back to what you were actually asking of this. And for a moment, I stopped writing those sort of things, and I sold a couple of family animations and things like that. And what happened was my eldest daughter, Spencer, adores horror much more than I ever did. And now we have access to Shudder and all these fantastic streaming programs. She just, but this is when she was 8 years old and loved all of these spooky things. And I thought, why am I? And I had an idea for a new script. And it was at that moment that I realized that I had to explain to the kids that I'm going to be writing something spooky and something might happen to daddy. That it takes me a moment to shake it off when you come home. If I'm quiet, if I appear to be brooding, I'm not mad. I'm not. This is just something. It takes a moment when you are. And so this script and the kids listened carefully. And Spencer asked, "What's the story about?" And it's about a girl who is abducted, and it's her sister is trying to find her and trying to find, and the girl is locked up somewhere, and it's the story of the sister trying to find her way back to her sister. And I explained this is what's going to happen. And the next day, my daughter Spencer came to me and said, "Daddy, I've got a title for you." And I thought, "Okay, here we go." And she said, "In the Dark." And I went, "That is fantastic." Now, it is no longer called In the Dark, but for a number of years, it's Gail Ann Hurd is producing it. It's currently called Obscura, but they understood that when I was writing that, and you carry that. So there, I'm in the head of this sister, and she is convinced she knows who has abducted. It's a throwback to the amazing kind of Joe Esterhaus 1990s thrillers, Jagged Edge, Basic Instinct. That sort of very simple. There's just two or three characters, and it's simply posed is he the abductor or is he not? Is that simple? And she is convinced that he is the abductor. No one else is, so she worms her way into his life to try and find her abducted sister. But you carry all that with you, all that angst, all that self-doubt, all of that, and it wanders around with you. And you think, I never thought about it, but again, before kids, never entered my head, and I'd just be a grumpy writer or whatever I would be. But then with kids, you have to be very careful to not bring that home with you. So I found that difficult, but I found a way now. Now I can do. Now it's because I've now written for 15 years with kids.
Yeah.
You get into, okay, now I have an office. I'm not there at the moment, but I have an office that I can go to, and that's where I can get into that headspace.
Wow. See, because that's a thing. You hear a lot about, an actor gets really deep into the part. I famously Heath Ledger in The Joker, but I think about the writers. I'm like, that's only one character to get into the head of. This person has to not only get into that terrifying head, but to jump in and out of a bunch of heads, and some might be very light, and you've got to turn the dark off and get light, and then you got to go right back to the dark, and it's it's quite an act for an artist to kind of pull off. And I mean, I commend you, especially for somebody.
And it might not work for everybody, but what I've done is something like Identity, that has the 10 different characters. And I would literally, I started with a piece of paper and I'd just write as many opposites as possible. And from that, you would attempt to create 10 different characters. And then you try and write the script as best you can, jumping from character to character. But then what I would do is afterwards is you do 10 rewrites just from each character's point of view. You want to tell the story so that when a character wanders in from the bathroom, that they've actually got a story coming with them. What have they been up to? What are they carrying into the scene? Because quite often you are writing from a plot point of view. I think especially that first run through, where a thriller, especially a thriller that has all these twists and layers, you're definitely trying to navigate the plots. But then you will write character through that. But then I think afterwards to write from these different points of view is very useful.
Awesome. And as somebody who's directed movies that he has written, and also had movies directed by other people, who had like movies you've written that have been directed by other people, is there a difficulty kind of giving the script away to somebody else and kind of letting them do it, as opposed to just being able to work on your own text?
Depends on the director. When James Mangold directed Identity, he's astonishing. I could not do what he did. He brought layers and levels and elevated it. And you just sit back and go, oh, yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's really clever. Yeah, I like that. All of these in Identity, if anyone hasn't seen Identity, there's a fun twist to what is actually going on with these 10 characters. So it's difficult, but the director knowing that there are so many little clues and things that he added with his production team and the design team. So no, when you have a director that it is patently obvious that they are elevating your work, it's very easy. It's frustrating when my main thing, the problems that I've had is with pacing, is that what Jim Mangold understood is that Identity is a popcorn thriller. It's just ink, and it's got a lovely pace, and he knew that from the word go, and the actors knew that, and the cinematography knew that, and everything was on the same page, and the boat was all going in the same direction. It's when, and I quite often find that, and you have to say this to the director, if they try and lean on the work and lean on the words and slow it down, that's where there was Six Souls. The directors did an amazing job, but the first cut of Six Souls was over 3 hours long. It was fantastic. It's my favorite version of it because everything is there. And there's all questions that come up in when people watch Six Souls. They go, why is she doing that? That makes well, there was this whole sequence where this happened, and now, oh, that makes sense. But a lot of it was tempered down that you just couldn't fit it in. They never got to the stage where they could do a director's cut and see it. But in the editor's room, it was fantastic, but it was long. It's a 3-hour movie is just too long.
Yeah. And just for going back to Identity for a second, if you haven't seen it, what are you doing? Go see it right now. Just grab it. Go find it. Now, it was,
It's a fun thriller. It's quick. It's 90 minutes.
It's a fantastic movie. And I was a person always who would basically empty horror shelves at video stores. I would go, we used to have a deal at a place nearby us where you could get, it was 5 movies for 5 days for $5, all the old, and it, like, no new releases type thing. And you could replace them as often as you wanted. So I would have friends over for the weekend, and we would go get 5 movies. We'd come back, we'd watch them, and 10 hours later, we'd be back at the video store with the new 5 movies. We'd watch those overnight. We'd return them in the morning when they opened, and we would just do that and do that and do that. And it's like, you go through everything. And I ended up doing that a lot with my wife. And that's how we came across Identity. And it was just like, it was one of those sit down, and I knew nothing about it going in. I didn't know if it was going to be a slasher, if it was going to be this or that. And I was just, it was a wonderful surprise to come across. Next thing I want to...
that's when... That to me, Identity is the best example of when I've written something of how it's been brought to life by the producers. Mm-hmm. Kathy Conrad, producer of Scream, Jim Mangold, who's just done all these fantastic, and he jumps from genre to genre. Yeah. I mean, he's brilliant. I don't know why he's gonna win everything at some point. He's just phenomenal.
Absolutely. And the other thing I wanted to talk about too is another thing you've done is you've adapted your own play into a movie. You did that with The Eye Inside, which was adapted from Point of Death. Now, adapting another text into a movie is something that's done all the time, but what is it like to actually take your own text and adapt it into a different format?
Well, that film, the original script, was a very faithful, almost a word for word of the play. That we were trying to get a sort of low budget, all in one location. The play just takes place in a hospital room in 2 different time zones. It's a wonderful. The play is very clever of how it jumps back and forth between the time zones. But the Point of Death was it was rewritten. It was at some point it was taken out of my hands and rewritten, and I find it very confusing. The last sort of 30 minutes of that film doesn't make any sense. The play makes sense, and I'm not entirely sure what they were doing, what they were going for, because it was taken out of my hands and it became something a little different at the end. But the actual the conversion was pretty simple. I wasn't. It was almost a word for word translation. There was some flashbacks here and there, but at one point this may have been when I was taken off the project. I had suggested it be done in one continuous take, that you would follow the lead character because he's got some sort of brain damage. He doesn't know if he's brain damaged or if he's linking memories together or if he is actually wandering from time to time. And my thought was, how cool would it be is if you could set it up and obviously shoot it in takes, but make it seamless in that sort of 1917 kind of style. And at that point, I think they went, yeah, we're going to get another writer.
Now, that's not something that's super uncommon in Hollywood as far as, different people coming on, doing different drafts and that sort of a thing. At the time, just, being a writer in the industry, do you just kind of shrug it off and move on to the next thing? Or is there a little period of kind of taking it personally, or how do we deal with that?
Yeah, I'd be lying if you don't take it personally. You put your heart and soul into these things, and when your brain goes, oh, my heart and soul isn't good enough, and you want someone else to think, yes, that's it. There is some heartbreak involved in that. But there's so many different formats and media that in the plays that I've written, but even more. going between film and television, just where the writer fits into the hierarchy, where in television, the writer is the producer, and you have a lot of final say in what's going on. And the more successful the writers are, not me in television, but the successful writers have absolute final say. A Shonda Rhimes isn't taking notes from a studio or network. She has established herself that this is what we're doing, and fantastic. But even that respect trickles down to other writers in television, that they are. I remember on the first time I had a pilot filmed, and the director asking if it was all right to change a line, and I couldn't. I almost looked behind. Who are you talking to? You're talking to me? Yes, sure. I couldn't. And it is that. So that takes a bit of getting used to, especially when you sort of jump between the two. You have to go, oh yeah, I have to do what I'm told. I'm pitching a movie now, so you have less authority here.
Wonderful. It's that's something that always gets me. Is I've spoken to a lot of people who've worked on different projects and things like that, and it's such a world of just beyond rejection. But like, I do research on movies, and I see a movie will go through about 10 different writers, and then there'll be arbitration over credits and all these different things. And again, it's why writers and writing fascinates me so, because it's such a crazy part of the film industry. And what you said about TV is 100% right. It's this kind of glued together team with this head that kind of just makes it all and just gets through. And yeah, I totally hear what you mean. Like the politics between the two seems so different. But I want to get to the reason we're here. I want to get to Jack Frost. Right off the bat, how I discovered this is actually a way, something that I discussed with another director, Jordan Downey, who directed Thanksgiving, came on the show, and we were discussing covers, especially back in the day when, movies were on shelves waiting to be picked up, to be rented and whatnot. And one that was brought up was indeed Jack Frost as being a very eye-catching drawing cover. And how do you feel about that, especially back then? How do you feel about kind of the importance of a movie cover drawing the attention when you might not have, a promotion machine behind the movie to let people know that it exists?
Yeah, there's a giant story that leads into that question. There's an hour discussion. But at that point, the only reason Jack Frost got noticed is that fantastic lenticular cover. It's 100%. I know that the movie was dead and buried, and this marketing guy, who I never remember his name when I tell this story. There was a marketing guy, young guy at Unipix, and they picked this movie up for nothing, for peanuts, out of a bargain basement. And again, there's a giant story I can get into. And he picked it up and went, I know how to sell this. And he came up with it. They did a couple of lenticulars at the time, but this one was super famous. If I can just jump out of the screen for a second.
By all means.
I've got this. This is the only few in the world.
Oh my God.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting reflections. But
no, it's okay.
This was a gift to me after the show.
Oh wow!
And this is this is I think that's worth more than I was actually paid on Jack Frost. It was a gift, and that just hangs out in the house.
That's genius.
I said Unipix. It was Apix at the time.
Okay.
Apix became Unipix. It's Apix. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll tell you, that's precisely how I discovered it, and it was an interesting one because I remember walking down the aisle of a Blockbuster, and I saw it. Yeah. And then I did the double take, and that was the kind of thing we were looking for. We weren't searching around anywhere else. We went right to the horror section, and we were like, I want to find something fun to watch today. And we were going, and that one caught my eye, and it actually like a magnet pulled me back. And I was like, okay. And I just picked this one up. I'm like, I'm not asking for votes today. This one's getting rented. And it's such a fun movie. I read that you came up with the idea for this movie in like 1989. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's time. I don't know where it's all disappearing now, but yeah, this is. I had. Yeah, it must have been about 1989, 1990, around there. Yeah, I'm about 24 years old. The So I had a house, I had a cabin up in Big Bear, and I had my great mates, Jeremy Page and Vicky Slotnick, who are the producers, and Jeremy and I came up with the idea together. We'd go up and stay at the cabin and just a weekend shoot the breeze, and we built a snowman in the backyard, not trying to make it anything, but it just happened that our crappy snowman making looked kind of spooky, and it sat out. They're a couple. They're married now, Vicky and Jeremy, and the snowman sat outside their window. And Vicky the next morning goes, "I couldn't sleep because of that stupid thing staring in the window." And we joked about it, and as we kept on joking, we went, could you make a horror movie about a snowman? And all those discussions go on. What would it be? And so I wrote it. I wrote this, the first script, and the first versions of this script. I'm going to go. These stories have been told before. This is like I'm like the grandpa now telling these old stories again and again. So tell me to stop talking. I'll go on.
I will never tell you to stop talking.
So I wrote this. I wrote the script, and originally it was a bigger budget script, and the director, at one point, Rennie Harlan was going to direct it, and it was going to be this sort of $25 million budget. It was set in a city rather than where it is this little snowmanton, and it was sort of because it was right when the T-1000 was coming out, and some of the effects that I was writing, in my head went, well, hey, for 25 million, this is something that can be done. You can do these amazing water. It's a serial killer made of ice and water and all these things that it was. Now, I don't know if any of these stories are true. This is just what I heard. But what I heard was that Rennie Harlan's girlfriend read the script and said, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever read. And besides, I want to do a pirate movie." And that was Gina Davis and whatever that, which was fantastic. It was fantastic. I mean, I know it did terrible, but it's a really fun movie. And anyway, so Rennie Harlan bailed on the project, and you talk about being heartbroken. I was heartbroken. I went back to England.
Oh, wow.
I was crushed. We were like, this is going to be it. I'm breaking in. Rennie Harlan was just off of like Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger. It's like, oh my goodness. And it crushed me. And I went back to England. And my dad's in the theatre business. And I went to work in one of his box offices in London. And I wrote a play. And that started a different sort of career. Anyway, out of the blue, the company Prism, and I don't know how they read it. Prism's no longer with us. They read Jack Frost, loved it, and they call up Vicky and Jeremy and say, it's full of these special effects. Can you make it for less than $1 million? And of course, the standard answer is, of course you can make it for less than $1 million. Yeah, but all these effects, we'll figure. Yeah, that's a problem for another. Of course we can do it. And and beautifully, Vicky, when they realized, because I'd made some money with a play. I wrote a play that made some money, and I went back to Los Angeles. We set up a little production company, so I was there with them. And we were making short movies. We were trying to get things happen when this phone call came in. And I think it was Vicky who said, yeah, we can do it, but Michael has to direct it. And they went, great, we can't afford a director anyway, so who cares who directs it? And so that's how we started this film. Is when Prism found it. I don't know how they found it at the bottom of the basket and read it. And so Prism, the way in which the money works on these things is you get $1 million budget. That's not what you get. You don't get $1 million budget. Back in that day, this is sort of the direct-to-video, and it's all above my pay grade of how the finance actually works. but you have to pay for financing and pay executive producers to find it, and you put massive interest rates. Literally I don't know if it's $10,000 a day or $5,000 a day, but it is a ticking clock, which is why when the moment you begin pre-production and you have this loan, there are these bankers who do these loans, massive, forget your credit card interest rate. This is 30-40%, massive interest. That the moment and the clock begins in pre-production, so the sooner you can hand in the script, you can get through it, you can stop it and pay back the loan. That's when your interest stops. So we had about $500,000 to pay, maybe a scratch more than $500,000 to pay for this, and that's when you have to have a sit down with the producers and they go, you're not making T2. It's not going to happen. You cannot think that's what, that amazing visual effect of him melting and coming in under the door and refreezing. Yeah, we got a garden hose and that's how we're going to do that. So you have to do, your brain shifted. And I have the fondest memories of making that movie. Mm-hmm. Everything was a puzzle. How can you do it? What can you put on film? And we shot on film, shot on short ends. We found Fujifilm, fantastic director, and we called in all our favors. And this is why it's difficult to know what the budget actually was, because the cinematographer, Dean Lent, he's shot other wonderful things. He just shot Gas, Food and Lodging, which is a big indie success. And he could demand a lot of money. He could demand, I don't know, pulling numbers out of the air, $50,000. Well, he's a best mate of Jeremy's. He was a best mate. And he said, slip me $5,000 and I'll do it, whatever it was. And so you start calling in favors, and the focus puller, you give him the job of first cameraman, and so everybody gets a little something out of it. So we paid for everything, but yes, you're getting favors as well. So if you had to pay everybody, you're probably looking at a couple of $1 million. But we did, everybody did. It's not that we didn't stiff anybody. We didn't say, yeah, we're paying you, then we're not. Everyone was doing this for favors. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that happened was put me on a set, and I am enthusiastic and I'm happy and I'm encouraging, and we had a blast, and people bought into that, of what we were doing and what we were making, and people worked so hard and long hours and did things they didn't need to do and put the extra effort in. And that's why I think 20 years later, it's filled with love, and which is a strange thing to say for a slasher silly movie, but you can tell that everyone who was there wanted to be there, was putting the effort in, and loved being there. It was a super fun set to be on and to puzzle solve everything that went wrong.
And that seems to be a very common thing of people I've spoken to who are involved in horror movies, especially things that aren't gigantic budgets and stuff like that, because everybody has to kind of come together in a way that might not be necessary when you've got money, coming out your butt, and you're just, you throw money at everybody and they've got their own teams. So I do love that. And it's a thing I've always loved about horror, because horror is not a genre that they throw a lot of money into a lot of times, because they know that it's either coming out in theater to a limited audience because it's rated R, or it's going straight to video, or what have you, which is fantastic. But now, what do you do? To my knowledge, this is the only time this has ever happened. What do you do when you have a movie that you've come out with, and only a year later you find out that a movie with the exact same title with a very similar plot comes out? Where you have another movie about a man who dies and becomes a snowman, and it comes out 1 year later.
Okay, I'm not going to name names, but going back to the story, and it's not Rennie Harlan.
Okay.
But when it was that big budget movie, mm-hmm. one of the producers is one of the producers on the other Jack Frost movie. So completely different movie.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
you know, someone must have gone, yeah, I get that, but we can't do a horror movie. What can we do? I love the idea of a snowman coming to life. What can we do?
Yeah.
So is there inspiration there? Yeah. Look, I love it. It's just another one of those stupid stories associated with Jack Frost that people working in Blockbuster, bored at night, would flip over the movies and ha ha ha, some poor family gets my Jack Frost. You go online, you read that people, that was their favorite thing to do, was to, if they didn't like a family, they'd give them the wrong Jack Frost.
That's great. Actually, that Jack Frost was on the podcast How Did This Get Made? And they did this before a live audience, and somebody brought your movie up. As they were like, are you aware that this other movie exists? And they were aware, and they actually just by show of hands had people say, how many people watched that one thinking that was the movie we were doing this time? And there was a number. I mean, it wasn't like half of the crowd. Yeah. And it's fantastic.
That's our little movie that could. They dismissed it. It's at the time they didn't think it was going to get a release. It's the people's watching it again and saying it's fun. You said you started off this by saying, you know, this is how I discovered Jack Frost. Most this is how I discovered Jack Frost stories start with I was so drunk, and then the story goes on. So I was so drunk, I picked it up and it was mine. But the people want to show it for whatever reason. They want to show this movie, and I don't think the producer of the other film. They didn't give us any. We're a tiny little $1 million, $500,000, no budget foam snowman, and that's all right.
That's great. I had originally just chalked it up to, it's a thing that happened especially in the 90s where movies just came out in twos. Armageddon and Deep Impact came out. Bug's Life and Ants came out. It was just happening all the time. So that happened, but then they just happened to be so kind of tied together. And I mean, it didn't even really occur to me that there might have been some kind of overlap in bodies or anything like that. I was just like, I could see two people having very different, similar ideas about this, especially at that time. And it just kind of blew my mind. But I picture seeing that and exactly what you said, people mixing up the movies and stuff like that. That's where my brain goes when I see that. You hear one day you're just sitting at home and all of a sudden you're like, coming to theaters soon, Jack Frost. And you're like, wait, what? Now the movie opens to a very familiar voice to me at the moment because the voiceover at the beginning is indeed you.
Look, every scene in Jack has a story. That's why a podcast could go on for days talking about it. However long it took to make the movie, I can talk about it. So what happened was we didn't have a title sequence, and we got so what to do with money. Got a quote in to do a real title sequence, and we can't afford that. And the art department said, we'll make a Christmas tree and we'll draw it everything. And they made this beautiful tree. And Dean Lent, the photographer, was trying to do it in one take. We couldn't do it. So there's that. But anyway, we shoot this and we edit it and we look at it and go, it's kind of dull. It needs something. And we knew that there was a sort of a backstory missing to it of who is Jack Frost. We kept on. We didn't have it, and we had to snip bits out of the actual film. And I said, well, let me just write, as you know, this is the story so far. So I went back, written overnight. I wrote that, and I knew that I don't know what the timing is, 1:32. And I would do it as I was doing it, and I would do the voices. And yeah, perfect, 1:32. Again, we were doing ADR, and we've got one day to do all the ADR, which is impossible. And it's right at the end of the night, and this and we've got an actor in. He's an actor doing other bits and pieces, other voices, and he's going to do this voiceover. We've got the two actors. We've got Marsha Clark, who plays Marla, actually does the little girl in it.
Okay.
And they Uncle Henry, tell me a story. And and they do a take, and it comes in like almost twice as long. And it's the guy's voice and I said, no, look, you can, you just speed it up. It's a simple note. Just bang through it. Speed it up. He tried it again. He couldn't do it. And this is right at the end of the day. We're like 2 hours over. The sound manager is bickering. I've got to close down. You've got 5 minutes, and we've got to do it. And the actor said, "You can't do it." I said, "You can do it. I'll go ahead and tell me a story. Once upon a time, there's a man named Jack Frost. And I just did it. And they just stood up and just did it with Marsha. With on one mic, doing it, overlapping. I stumbled through it, and the manager goes, "Great, you've got it." And literally turns off the back. We're like, "No, you can't use me. Why is there an Englishman saying pecan pies in the Midwest?" It doesn't make any sense at all. But that's what the only take we have that was done in 1:32 was my take. So that's what we did.
Oh, it was absolutely brilliant, and actually the speed of it was kind of wonderful because it like creates this intensity for telling your child the story that was just like out of this world.
Yeah.
Going into the audition process, I had read that somebody auditioning for Jack had pulled out a knife during the audition.
Yeah.
Now, what's really funny is the movie that we did prior to this was Con Air, in which Mickey Rourke auditioned for the role of Cyrus that John Malkovich eventually got, and he pulled out a knife. Why are people always pulling knives out in auditions, and does it ever work?
No, it doesn't work because you're going to have that on the set. Because that's part of with an audition. To a lesser degree, you're going to be working with this person, and no, I don't want a crazy person on my set. That's we've got enough problems without wondering if one of the actors is going to pull a ship on.
Oh man, that just blew my mind. But the role eventually did go to Scott McDonald, who, brilliant. Just the look of him alone, it was such a shame that you only actually get his face on screen for as much time as you do, because he just was that horror murderer so well. What was it like working with him though? What was it like working with him in the booth though? So we take his face out of the equation, and he's got to keep that character up that he's created.
Well, yeah, we auditioned that. I think that might have been the last role to fill, because you were looking for that certain something, and you can describe the character, but to describe a voice and to know, and you were just listening to voice after voice, and this is unfortunate. It would have been much easier. Now you're just watching things on tape or listening to things on tape, and you can home audition. We were bringing actors in, and I would see them all because it was difficult to convey to the casting director exactly what you were looking for. When you're looking for a type, you can go, "Yeah, I'm looking for this tool and looks like this and does that." But when a voice, I found difficult to describe of how Jack has fun with himself. And so many of the actors would come in and not get the fun of it. Yeah, they'd have a great voice, but what Scott was able to do was able to have fun and mix it up. He would, he's got some nasty, serious lines, and then he's got, "I can see your house from up here," when he's hit by a truck. And he would embrace all of it. And he was wonderful. And he'd give you choices, which I always appreciate with an actor. He'd give you reads, and very malleable. And he's a great guy.
That's great. And what was really interesting just about your cast in general is one thing that you kind of come to expect from a horror movie is it's usually just a handful of young unknowns that we're just going to pick off one by one. And something that I find in this movie that you just don't find are seasoned actors. Christopher Allport, a guy who's been in a lot of things before Jack Frost, is the lead in this movie, or your protagonist. And why did you decide to kind of go that route?
Well, I think what you'll find is that those threads lead back to the original script, which was the Rennie Harlin script.
Okay.
So in my head, it's Die Hard. So you're looking for, it never started off as a bunch of teenagers trying to survive the night. And so that character came through. I wanted someone with a family. I wanted someone who was going to have to protect his son. In the original screenplay, there's big sequences of protecting the family, that Jack is after his family. He's singled in on the family. And so you wanted that. You wanted the family man, and the family man has grown up friends, and that just sort of naturally fell into place, that your main core of actors is that age, and then your teenagers are just below that when you're filling up your world.
All right, and we talk about teenagers, and then something that surprised me, even though I have seen this movie multiple times, it just completely slipped my mind. Shannon Elizabeth is in this movie, her first movie, and it just kind of.
We gave her I think the phrase is Taft-Hartley. We got her SAG card. Yeah.
That's awesome. And did you just find her during the audition process then, or?
Yeah, just auditioning. Apparently you're not meant to do it, but I didn't know that at the time because I was so green. But what I would do is also mix up actors to see how they were with each other. And Darren, who those, and so it was lovely to be able to see, and they were willing to do that. Mm. And Shannon's great and had this lovely energy, but to see those two together, they just clicked and were fun, and it was that was the couple that had to be in it. But it was just an audition process, seeing lots of people, and Shannon walked in, and no, that was her. She had this lovely brightness that she has. She's a very, very sweet lady.
That's wonderful. That was something that really struck me as I watched it this time, just for the researching of the movie, is how many recognizable faces there really were. And that's just something you don't come to expect from a movie that you just kind of stumble across one day. And so that was wonderful. And I want to talk about her death scene in the movie, because I've read one thing. I want to confirm if it's true first. Originally, it was not supposed to come across as being a sexual death. Is that correct?
No, she was never meant to be raped to death. That was not the intent at all. The idea is that rises up and just slams her into the wall and kills her that way.
Yeah.
Again, everything has a story. It was definitely the last day. I don't know if it was the last thing we were shooting. It's not the last thing, because we set fire to Jack was the last thing we actually did.
Okay.
But it was the last day. That was the most complicated thing in the whole movie, is that bathtub sequence.
Yeah.
Because what in fact you have is, and this is, so we did, I think we did one day on a soundstage, or a warehouse as it was. So it's in a controlled environment, and there are two different sets. There's a bathroom set, which has a regular bathtub in it that you can film someone in the bathtub. And you have to build baths, because you can't film, you can't put camera equipment. So you have to build. All bathrooms are usually built on TV movies. So we've got that set, and then comes the question of how you're going to raise an 8-foot snowman out of a bath. And this is so I'm having a brain fart when not shot listed, but when you draw it all out. I'm going crazy.
Storyboard.
Everything was drawn out.
Yeah.
Was that?
Storyboard?
Storyboards, thank you. So everything was storyboarded, and like what we knew, you couldn't have an overhead shot of him forming and coming out. It was just too difficult to do. And this is talking with stunt people and the engineers and set designers of how you're going to pull off this trick. And the way in which we came up with was the second set was built about 12 feet off the ground. There's scaffolding going up to it. So 12 feet off the ground is a cutaway, but it's the cutaway of the bath. There's a bathtub there, and there's a hole in the bottom of the bathtub. And underneath is a scissor lift. And on the scissor lift are rails, and on the rails there is a wheel contraption, and the 8-foot snowman with a stuntman in there is in that, and it wheels back and forth. And the idea is this thing goes zzz, it goes up, so there's a side shot, it goes up in, and that's the big shot, and you pull back of him just coming straight up. The girl is attached to him, so there is and this is 12 feet off the ground. This is this is a stunt. And underneath what Shannon's wearing, she is strapped to him with like a seatbelt stuff to the, And so this thing comes up and it's on rails and it goes up and it doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work. And it's getting later and it's taking forever to set up. Shannon is amazing. This poor thing, pretty much naked, covered in shaving foam, 12 feet in the air, strapped to this thing's going up and down. And we eventually get it to work. I mean, after hours and hours, and it goes up and it comes back and the carrot doesn't hit her in the eye, but it hits her right here on that first thing. Okay, stop. The medic comes in, we bring her down, we unstrap her. This whole thing goes on. And, we're running out of time. And I said, well, just forget the carrot, take it in. And you can see the carrot knows that someone goes up, puts shaving foam where the carrot was, and we get it. And it goes up and we smash her into the back. And we get this very, very complicated shot. 3 weeks later, we're in the editing booth, and the editor's like, well, you know what it looks like? Oh, crap. And like everything, we had to then just fine, if that's what we've got, lean into it. Look, if I was doing it now, I wouldn't make the same choices. But I'm an idiot 27-year-old thinking, yeah, that's kind of funny. And so we did it, and we lent into it. And it's become this infamous scene of her being raped to death. Not particularly funny when you think about it. Would I do it again? No. I'd make sure that it was obvious we weren't doing that. But that's what we got. That's part of the law of Jack Frost now.
And you know what? And I think, and it's the missing carrot, I think, that draws a lot of that too, and then the putting it back on and all these things. And actually a friend of mine who does another podcast called Dueling Decades, brilliant podcast, I'm a part of that, that's not me self-promoting, but he asked me, because I told him I was interviewing you guys and I was interviewing you, and he was really excited, and he said just make sure to ask him what happened to the carrot in the shower. So you've answered the question already.
That's what happened to the actual prop.
Yeah.
When the behind the scenes, that's what actually happened. But then when you see what you got on film, and then we lent into it, even to the point that in the credits, someone was, there's where's the carrot comes up in the credits of the movie, in the final credits, it scrolls up, where's the carrot? So.
I saw that, and I was noticing that again, and I'm like, I forgot about the quotes. There are quotes all through the credits, which is another seeming first. What were those from? What did those all, like, who generated those quotes?
I forget what they all are. They were things on the set. They were in-jokes on the set. But I don't... Mongo likes movies. I can't remember how it came up. But Dean Lent, our cinematographer, very smart, cerebral, cool guy. So I think it was Dean, after he liked a shot, would go, Mongo like shot. And so Mongo become, I don't know why. And I wasn't around for half of, all these things go on. There's these other little things that go on. But Mongo like shot. I believe that's where that came from.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm a caboose. I think that's because we had this great one of the reasons the movie was able to actually happen is such and I'm forgetting his name, our first AD, who's gone on to do other great first AD work. He'd always be the last to find out that we'd made a change, and no, we did. And he felt, and I think his phrase was, I feel like a caboose, and that's why that's there. That, oh no, we're not doing that. We're now doing it. We're going to drop an ice cube for the. Go, wish someone had told me that we're doing that. So I think it was always a fast moving, and he'd have to catch up and figure out how to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just really curious about those because I started.
And then there's my favorite one, which is all credit cards supplied by the director, which is absolutely true. It's how we got into it. Is all at the beginning, before Prism came in and took over. This is because I'd written a play and I had a success with the play. And the story behind that, my dad is a very successful playwright.
Yes. And
when everything failed, I went back and I wrote a play, and the play became a success in Norway, of all places. And my dad is thinking, oh, fantastic, the family business, he's going to take over the family business. Mm-hmm. And I am literally on the next plane back to Los Angeles with my check going, we're making a movie. And so my dad had to watch that. So yeah, when we moved into production offices and got started, it was my credit cards. I think I got paid back some of it, but who knows?
Oh, that's good. Did your dad ever share with you thoughts on Jack Frost after you you went back to go make that movie?
Absolutely, he is. He know this is he knows how the sausage is made. You know, from the theatre, he knows how you get things done, and so he is proud of what I was able to do. He knows all the. You can look at it and go, "Oh my goodness, what is this?" If you know that all the stories that go into it, there's no snow, it's 80 degrees in the wind. If you know all the stories, like my dad does, he can go, "Well done." He's very proud. He's proud of me, which is lovely. So he knows how much I love making that movie, and he was in the sequel.
Oh, that's awesome. I wanted to I wanted to ask about the sequel too. Like, did you have intentions about a sequel? Because you did that classic thing at the end where like the bubbling of the antifreeze and all that. Was that just kind of a little throwaway fun moment going, oh, we'll just kind of leave it open-ended for...
Yeah, absolutely leave it open-ended. Didn't know if you'd ever get to make a sequel, but yeah, absolutely. That was all those sort of direct-to-video horror movies. You had to do that. There had to be some open-ended little bit for sure.
Yeah, and the tag to Jack Frost 2, which is Revenge of the Killer Mutant Snowman, was that added in just to remove any kind of confusion with the other one that was now out by now?
Yes.
Or, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, that's oh man. I want to go back to some of the scenes too because there's some really good deaths in this one, and I wanted to ask how you write a death when you're making a slasher in this in this format. How is it that you like write up a death, like a death scene in this? I always think about that when I'm watching a Friday the 13th or anything like that.
Well, I always wanted to, you mentioned Friday the 13th, first horror movie I ever saw. And the Kevin Bacon through the neck, the whole thing. You know, those are memories. Absolutely terrified. Watched it too young. My horrible big brother made me watch it, and all of that stuff goes on. But it's that wanting to, when you're making Jack Frost, and knowing what we were doing, once we knew that it wasn't Rennie Harlan directing it, and we had $500,000, it was going to be a riff on a Christmas special, is that you wanted hopefully to be unexpected, that, and you go, okay, and just not being too crazy, but going, okay, I'm going to kill, there's a guy with an axe and Jack is going to take the axe and kill him with the axe. I've seen it, and we couldn't do it as well as it's done. I can't take an axe and put it in someone's forehead. You know, that is, yes, that would have been lovely to do. We didn't have the money to do it. And it's been done, and beautifully done, and superbly done. And so what can you do to subvert the expectation? Which is why we do it handle first, and I happen to have, I'm going to get another little prop for you.
Oh, man.
I've now locked these away because the kids were playing with them too much. But there is, you know, that's the axe handle.
This is not irony. That's true.
So that, that might, I don't know if that is the character, that might be the one that hits Shannon in the eye. I like to think that. And that's, so there's probably Shannon's eyelash is probably somewhere in there. And then what else? There's a pipe also in there. There's Jack's pipe somewhere.
Wonderful. I'm not being ironic. I am very much fanboying out when I see things like that.
I get it. That's cool. No, it's lovely to have that. But yeah, so when you come into a death, the thought was, what haven't I seen before? Mm-hmm. And so Sally's death on the Christmas tree.
That was great.
I hadn't seen that before. You know, strapping her up, putting someone on a Christmas. It might exist. I happen not to have seen that. There's a little, in Identity, one of the deaths. I put the axe down the throat. I did the same thing in Identity. There's a baseball bat down someone's throat. They did it so well in Identity. when you got 20 million to throw at it, that looks really. That's not just someone holding a bitten off bit of prop. That was the prosthetics down the neck. That was That was
Ah,
superbly done.
awesome. Now, do you have a favorite kill in the movie, or are they all kind of your babies because you created them?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I do. I do love the Christmas tree kill.
Mhm.
Um, that is, that's great. I think probably the Christmas tree kill, or the well, for simplicity, um, I'm forgetting the character's name. That's terrible. But Darren played him. The boy who takes the Shannon's boyfriend,
Yes.
who's the first Jack kill we see on screen, uh, and I love the icicle to the forehead.
That was cool.
Just look how we filmed it and how learned. I didn't know. I again storyboarded it, and then when I learned about the trick where you film this is the icicle and you film and you reverse it
Mhm.
and you just pulled it away and it's the editing. I love how that whole sequence is edited together. And it's actually the first day of shooting, and I'd shot some um, shorts and some bits and pieces, and I've been on a lot of sets, but that was my first day of shooting, flying by the seat of my pants, and obviously things going wrong, and didn't get everything that I wanted, and we ran out of time, and it was the first time we'd ever used Jack. And we had to get Jack through a doorway. No one had ever thought, how is an 8-foot snowman getting through a doorway? And that took time. Everything took time, and it was uh, Kelly, the editor,
Mhm.
made it. I hadn't given him all the elements he needed, and he put it together. And I think it looks really nice. I love the blue lighting.
Mhm.
I love the editing there, and the simplicity of an icicle to the forehead.
Yeah.
And just the way in which it's acted, and the icicle that pins him and comes out the back of the door,
Yeah.
the little detail of the blood pumping in the brain at the end, all of it. I like that. I like the simplicity of that.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on the end, the pulsating of what was left in the doorway, because I was like, you stuck on that shot for quite a while to like really show
I'm
that, and
proud
I
of
was
that.
just kind of like, oh,
No, they worked very hard to get that little brain pump. Yeah.
oh no, it was great. It was fantastic. Something else that came in this movie was actually a really interesting stunt. Was at the end when he jumps through the window with Jack in front of him into the
That's
pickup truck.
impressive. Yeah. No, if you there's no behind. There probably is somewhere. There's the behind the scenes of it. That's a real stunt.
Mm-hmm.
That is our stunt coordinator actually played the truck driver at the beginning. That is a guy holding. Yeah, so here's the stunt. We filled up the back of a truck with water,
Mm-hmm.
and it's timed. There is actually done in one shot. A guy runs out of a window, smashes through a window, and as this thing arrives, times it so he jumps in. That's a serious Jackie Chan stunt going on. That is a real thing. Plus, he's holding an 8-foot snowman at the time
Yeah.
out that window.
Yeah. Jumping blind.
Yeah, jumping blind, and it was all done on timing. Oh, it was scary to watch it happen.
Oh.
That's an impressive stunt to me. It didn't look good in one shot. The actual, so which is why we covered it in it. We had multiple cameras running for the shot. I think it was one take. So and the scene works better when you cut between the angles, but it is one shot into a moving truck. There is what you can see. There's a big wide shot where you can see a lot of the action happening, but he's already left the window, I think, by that time. No, deeply impressive. Kurt was the stuntman, the stunt coordinator who put it together, and said it can be done in one shot. And we trusted him, and he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, and there's a lot of elements in this movie too. And again, I say this just based on kind of an expectation going in. Again, you see the lenticular, you're renting a video, you're going to have fun, and you have moments like that, and you have lines like a good example is the callback to the snowballs joke. It's so well placed and so well delivered that it's almost like a movie that you would your expectation of the movie, that line almost is too good for it. You're just like, hey, that was like really well done. Because it's a silly joke at the beginning
there's
that's a
some
throw.
nice little elements in there. You're always having fun with it. But no, I like movies, and this is what Jim Mangold did for me on Identity, was he embraced what it was and then added layers that I didn't even know you could add. There's little things in Jack Frost that only I noticed. At the end of Jack Frost, when right after that stunt, and he does the alligator roll and melts Jack Frost in the antifreeze, and the little kid, the arm has fallen off. Daddy, you forgot this arm, and it goes around his head. So the arm, as he hits, and you can see as he hits the arm comes off as he hits the side of the truck. The arm comes off. At the beginning of the movie, when the little boy is making snowman cookies, a snowman has been placed by the side of the cookie tray, and his arm is off, and his arm has broken off, and is outside. There's lots of little things like that you would know. But that's the thought and love that went into it that I think you can tell if you like these sort of movies. And again, I always go back to, whoever made this loved what they were doing and loved the process. Yeah.
It absolutely shows on, like, even if it's just an unconscious level, it absolutely shows, because it's movies like this, if it doesn't show, they're thrown away and you saw it once and it never happened again. People, I know tons of people who have seen this movie, and people who think they're introducing it to me, going, "Oh, you think you know horror movies? Have you seen this one?" Of course, I've seen this one. What are you kidding me? But it definitely shows the attention that went into it, and again, it's something about a lower budget. There's something about just the horror genre. It's like everybody goes into that with love. I think that it weeds out the people who think that who might be a little too snooty for the genre, if you will, and it just leaves behind just the cream of the crop to make the best thing, which is hard to do. You couldn't make a lot of type of movies if you didn't have the right type of people there. If you had famously, there's a lot of sci-fi movies where one person hated being there, and it shows most of the time, but it really shows when the people all want to be there.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything that you're currently working on at the moment? Any scripts? Any?
Yeah, I'm actually writing another play, and of all the things I've written, weirdly, the most successful thing is a British stage farce called Cash on Delivery, that I'm very fortunate that it has played all over the world, and people have wanted a sequel to that for decades now, embarrassingly. And because of the state of the world at the moment, where everyone's staying inside, hopefully being safe, I can dedicate a moment to doing that. So I'm writing everything's stalled. There's deals and bits and pieces in television, but there is it's quiet for a moment, which is so. I go back to my roots. I never got paid for anything I wrote, so I'm perfectly happy to write things without getting paid if I love it and want to do it, and which is what this play is. So I'm writing a play at the moment. I have a really cool film, what I was mentioning before, that was called In the Dark.
Yeah.
It's now Obscura with Gail Ann Hurd. That's in a holding pattern because nobody really wants to go into production at the moment. Yeah. Fingers crossed next year that'll all get back up and running again. And that should be a good one. That should be a really good, as I said, throwback to the 1990s kind of thrillers.
That's great. I'll be looking forward to that one, because that's again, I love Gail Ann Hurd. I love everything about it. I'll definitely go out and support that one. Can you tell our listeners, our viewers, and what have you, how to find you online and all those good things?
How to find me online? I'm really boring online. I've got nothing online.
Okay.
I think I'm on. But I don't do on Twitter. That's all I got. No, I'm on. I'm not on anything. I'm terrible at self-promoting.
Okay.
So I'm vaguely on Twitter, and all I really do on Twitter is I will once every few weeks, especially now. This is the time. It's lovely. This gets you in the holiday spirit. Is I will search for Jack Frost and Jack Frost horror, and this is when people start watching it. And my favorite thing to do is to jump into their very private conversations, and that there's people talking about the movie, not knowing that I'm listening, for better or for worse. And I will very happily jump in, and some people go, "What the hell are you doing, you weirdo, getting in our conversations?" And some people will go, "Oh my God, the writer Jack Frost just commented on something I said," which is lovely, which just warms my heart that this silly movie exists. That's why I said there's someone like this morning on Twitter from a couple of days ago, they made a cheese ball of Jack Frost. and I had to jump in and go, "This is amazing. This silly thing that we made 20 years ago." I think they're watching the movie. They made a cheese ball and put a carrot in and did the whole thing.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's genius. That's fantastic.
That's great. And I mean, like you said, it's got to feel good when any project kind of like this far removed. We're over 20 years removed.
I know.
And just, and that's the thing. And that's proof that it's not like, because I mean, there's ironic love for these movies. A lot of times, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm going to watch this, blah, blah, blah." But to have people put an effort in, that's when it stops being irony.
I know,
it starts being very honest.
I am so touched to see that cheese ball. I know it's only going to be fun. It's not. That meant something to. Oh my God! Someone. Do you know the effort that took to make it? That is so touching that someone would do that. And I think the ironic love for things, I think one of the things about 20 years is you've weeded out the people who hate this, who can't, "What are you talking about? It's stupid." You must only be left with unless it gets passed down to a next generation of people of discovering it. But you've weeded out people. And now what you're left with, hopefully, is people who adore the silliness of it.
And that's really, again, just been my experience with this. And I do want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about it. I am very legitimately a fan of yours and this movie and your other projects, and it has been a real treat.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's been great fun. I love talking about Jack.
That's great. Thank you so much.